and we're going to talk about wide receiver, but they've spent a lot of money in draft capital in that position. Is that something they really want to attack that early? When you've got multiple third-round picks, you spent on that in the last 2 drafts. You traded for Jerry Jeudy. You traded for Amari Cooper. You traded for Elijah Moore. I mean, if you spend a second or third-round pick on a wide receiver, when is he going to play?
It's a great point because we used a third-round pick last year on Cedric Tillman, and I was just talking to somebody on social media this morning about, hey, what are the expectations for Tillman this year? And I said, I honestly don't know. There's a very realistic or possibility if the Browns draft a wide receiver in the second or third this year, Tillman all of a sudden could be looking at like the 6th option in the offense when you factor in a guy like David Njoku into the receiving weapon. So it's crazy how just packed that wide receiver room is. But I was going to ask you about that because, the Browns have spent a top 30 pick. They've met with a guy like Troy Franklin from Oregon. They met with him twice now. They've met with Malachi Corley and Malik Washington and some different names. I'm trying to think who else here, but those are just the ones off the top of my head. And do you think the Browns would, Ladd McConkey was another one, that was who I was thinking of. Do the Browns make a play for wide receiver? Because my personal opinion is I doubt they trade up. They just traded, and this is a little quick news update for everybody. They just traded Leroy Watson, who you might not even remember was on the team from last year. We signed him off the 49ers practice squad in November. He was signed to a futures contract, and then we just traded him to the Titans for a 7th-round pick, so we added additional draft capital. But I see the Browns sitting back waiting to see who falls, and if there's nobody there that they're in love with or they think, hey, we can move back 10 spots here, get an extra pick, and still get the guy we want, I think that's the more likely scenario.
Yeah, I completely agree because, like I said, you're not gonna require that person to play. And like you mentioned, Troy Franklin, I think he's going to be on the board at 54. I mean, he's fast, but he's small. Like he's really small frame. So I think the success rate of those guys that come into the league. I saw the other day they use BMI and stuff like that. It's metrics that are above my head, but the hit rate on those guys isn't very high. I mean, you basically had Devontae Smith, and that's about it. It becomes a lot murkier after that. And Troy Franklin was one of those guys that was on that list this year. So just based on that, he could be available at that spot, as well as some others that you mentioned that they had visits with. I mean, Malachi Corley, I'm a big fan of his game. I think he's Deebo Samuel, coming again here, just the way he's built and the way he runs after the catch. I mean, that's a guy that I would like to have on my team. But again, it's like, I mean, what is it? Are we pushing David Bell off the roster already?
And that's the guy that I feel is at a risk of maybe not making the roster. If the Browns go wide receiver with the 2nd or 3rd round pick for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're going to be shopping David Bell for a conditional 25 pick.
Absolutely, because they've still got a guy like James Prochet who they keep around because of the returning abilities and things like that. Now, does Nyheim Hines take over some of that? We'll see how it all plays out. But as far as your top 4 or 5 receivers, I mean, there's really no room to add anybody. And a guy like Corley, I think he's, from what I understand of him, and you tell me a little bit more about Malachi Corley, but I feel like he's the type of player that you find ways to get the ball into his hands, and he's going to, with the way he gets open and things, he's going to demand targets.
His Instagram name is Yak King.
And he was.
And it's very apropos. And when I saw him at the Senior Bowl, his thighs are like just tree trunks. Like you see thighs on this guy and you think he's an offensive lineman. That's how thickly built he is. He's built like a running back, but has the explosion of a wide receiver. Ran at a high 4.4 range, maybe low 4.5s, depending on who was talking to you at their pro day. But I'm a big fan of Malachi Corley. I think he's a mid-second to late second round spot. He maybe if the Browns, like you said, moved back off of 54, picked up an extra pick, maybe he's there at the bottom of the second round for a team that came up. I could see it. I mean, and like you said, definitely I think his snaps, I mean, he's going to take away, he could even take away snaps from Elijah Moore. I mean, I think they're playing a similar position there. So it would be interesting. to say the least.
And I know we prefaced this whole conversation talking about how packed the wide receiver room is for the Browns. But if you're thinking like Andrew Berry and like a general manager should, what is the deal next year? You know what I mean? Because you've got Amari Cooper. As of this moment, this is the last year. We don't know if he's going to be taking, a restructure to add on some years and if he's going to be here next year. We locked up Jerry Jeudy, but this is Elijah Moore's last year. So as far as 25 is concerned, you're looking at Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman. So that's when you look at it that way, wide receiver makes a whole lot of sense to try to get a guy that can develop and progress and be, a top option in the offense moving forward. And I think Malachi Corley, the more I watch him and, do work on him, I'm thinking, I would love to see him in one of these orange helmets right here. But so if we move down a little bit further in the draft, I think another name that's interesting because there's obviously been off the field maturity knocks on this guy and everything. And I haven't dived much into that stuff, but just from what I've listened to and heard from scouts analyzing Germaine Burton from Alabama, it sounds like this guy has the potential to be a do-it-all wide receiver that's not getting a whole lot of hype so far. What do you think about Burton?
The interesting thing with him this year was Alabama's passing game kind of went through him. And that's generally been an angle for success for players coming to the league. They put some top receivers, in the league here recently. But he was the guy for Jalen Milroe last year. He was his go-to. And it's an interesting player. There is the off-the-field stuff, or I guess technically it was on-field, but it was just after a game.
So what was it? Do you remember?
I want to say he punched a woman on the field.
Oh, geez.
It was in one of those field storming deals. And I don't know. I don't know all the angles of the story, but I know there's video of him doing it. So there's that, and there may be some other stuff too. He's bounced around multiple different colleges. I want to say he was at Georgia and Alabama as well. So there could have been something there. I don't know the full details, but I think he will be on the board in the third round for sure. So it's an interesting note, but the Browns have kind of, I'm not going to say have steered away from those guys, right? But they haven't not, especially with draft picks anyway. So we'll see how they treat it, because there's a couple of guys like that in this draft class that I think could fall in their laps as we're gonna take him here because the upside is too high.
There were two other wide receivers that I had thought of that I wanted to get your opinion on. Real quick, what is your take on, and a lot of Browns fans are throwing his name out all over our comment sections, we need to get Xavier Legette. We need to get Legette. I'll tell you my thoughts, but I think you can tell by my voice, not super high. How do you feel about Xavier Legette?
I love Xavier Legette.
You do? Okay, well, tell me why.
I do, because, he played in South Carolina, so that's the first start there. So there is a little built-in bias. But he was a well-thought-of recruit coming out, but for some reason, he just never got on the field. Now, if you read into the story a little bit, there's some extenuating circumstances. You had the COVID year kind of set him back. He had some injuries that set him back, and he had some off-the-field issues with family, not like not in
personal
trouble with the law, but some personal issues that kind of put it back. But in the Gator Bowl 2 years ago, I was at the game, and he just exploded against Notre Dame, had 90-something yards receiving and a couple of touchdowns. And then that kind of set the tone for this season, where he just came out of the gate hot against North Carolina, had 170 yards receiving, then had another 100-plus yards receiving the next week, to where he was had the fourth or fifth best season in South Carolina history receiving the ball. And we're talking about Alshon Jeffrey, Sidney Rice. They've had Sterling Sharp. They've had guys at that school, and he was one of the better, more productive seasons there they've ever had. He's fast. He's got great, he's definitely, when they say height, weight, speed, that's him, right? He's 6'2", 221, runs a 4.39 40. Compare that. He's 40 plus pounds heavier than Xavier Worthy was.
Yeah.
So, and he ran 4.39. To me, that's just as impressive as Worthy at 160 pounds running 4.21. So, and all his other testing was outstanding as well. So if you could look past why it took him so long to produce and see that he's a solid route runner, catches everything, he can create separation, he can go up and get a 50-50 ball, you can see the appeal of why you would want him on your team. Now, if you're a stickler for early breakout age and stuff like that, which are great, I mean,
those are good indicators.
He has one of the worst grades for early breakout age of any wide receiver in this class, may be the worst. Those there's something to be said about, because those guys tend to not hit.
Yeah.
So,
and that's where my hang up is. And it's just, now I did not go digging into the extenuating circumstances. Right. And I'm glad you laid that stuff out. I'm just looking at the sheer numbers saying, well, the dude played pretty much every game, or at least it seemed like, in these, his first 4 seasons, and he never had over 200 yards in any season. I'm like, that's not good. Like, that's kind of a red flag. And then all of a sudden it was like, what do you have this year? Like 1,200, 1,300? Another
thing that I think is going to help Legette going forward is the new kickoff rules.
Oh, is he
because
a good returner?
He was that was where he made his hay.
Interesting.
His first 3 years on campus. He had a couple of, I want to say against Texas A&M, he had a 100+ yard kick return for a touchdown, and he had several big kickoff returns at South Carolina. So I think he's going to get additional value there. And if he was to, say, be the Browns pick at 54, I don't think they would, because of the age thing that we talked about earlier. Right. But that would be, to me, where he made his immediate impact on their roster, as he was wide receiver 5, but as a kick returner. And maybe, like you said, you mentioned that Nyheim Hines, but I mean, he's another guy you did pay a whole lot of money. No. So you see what happens.
Yep. And I guess the other thing with Legette for the Browns anyway, there've been no indicators whatsoever that they're interested, because they have. Right. I haven't seen anything where they met with him at any step along the way. There's not like a top 30 visit schedule. And it doesn't mean they didn't do that. I don't think they did that with Tillman last year. He just fell to them and they thought value, so they took him, even though he was a little older.
They would have met him at the Senior Bowl, because
that's true.
Everybody meets everybody at the Senior Bowl.
That's true.
Multiple times. So they've had conversations with him. But again, I'm not even sure he's on the board at 54. So
and that's very possible.
I think it's a very good chance he's one of the Panthers picks at the top of the second round.
Yeah, well, they need help there too, big time. The last wide receiver, just real quick, thoughts on Malik Washington from Virginia?
One of the most highly productive guys in the country this year. And to me, it's impressive, considering Virginia was a dumpster fire at the quarterback position. So for him to produce as high as he did, he produced at Northwestern before transferring over to with another dumpster fire quarterback situation. So to me, that says a lot about a receiver, is when you can overcome that kind of piss poor quarterback play to put up those kind of numbers. Yeah. It says a lot. I think he's possibly going to go on the first towards the end of day 2. Maybe he's on the board early day 3, but I think his ceiling is probably in that 75 to 95 range, and then maybe a little bit after that.
I don't know about you, but whenever I was watching some tape on Malik Washington, doing a little digging, if the Browns were to grab him like in the 3rd round or something, I was thinking, okay, this could be the perfect Elijah Moore replacement after this year, because I feel like Malik Washington can do some of the stuff that they wanted Elijah Moore to do last year that he just wasn't all that great at, like the behind the line of scrimmage stuff, the out of the backfield plays and things like that, where I think Malik Washington could offer some upside. And man, is the dude, when he gets the ball, it looks like he's he's small. He's 5'9" or whatever, but he's 190, he's almost 200 pounds. He's very thick and girthy, and he's super fast, and he doesn't go down. I feel like I've watched so many times guys would hit him and then they go to the ground and he just takes off.
Yeah, he's in that clump of wide receivers that I think are all going to go in that same area with Germaine. We've already talked about Germaine Burton, but with Javon Baker from UCF, I think Jacob Cowing from Arizona, Brendan Rice from Southern Cal. I think all those guys are going to be kind of clumped together, and it's just going to become team preference at that point. as to what separates those guys to what teams.
One last name I want to talk about, because this is a guy that I don't even know how I 100% feel about him, and it's a wide receiver, and he would be that 54 pick. But talk to me about Keon Coleman.
Oh, man. Keon Coleman he's an enigma, right? Because you see the flash, you see the bang. There's a fireworks play almost in every game with this guy, right? And then he's dropped 3 other passes that you kind of forgot about. It's hard for him to separate. I don't see him creating a whole lot of separation at the NFL level. He's not fast, but he's big, right? But he gives you special teams upside because he's a great punt returner in Michigan State. He's a great punt returner at Florida State. But you don't see that. He can separate on a return, but can't separate from a corner. But he's great at getting the 50-50 ball. Right. So I go back and forth because it's like I see a lot of, like, with Bengals mocks mocking Keon Coleman for the Bengals at pick 49. That's like, no, I don't like that at all.
Do I want him? I don't know.
But do I? I mean, would I be okay? Maybe. The upside is there. He's a 3-year player. He's 6'3", 213.
So he's like,
but he's a 4'6". He's a 4'6" wide receiver.
Yeah,
that hurts. But he's 38-inch vertical and a almost 11-foot broad jump. So you're like, I don't know. But he was very productive too. You mentioned touchdowns. He caught a lot of those.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. Keon Coleman, an enigma.
Well, I'm glad that you're as like, I have no idea where to put this guy as I am, because there's times when I think he would fit well with the other wide receivers. And then I'm like, we already have Cedric Tillman. So yeah.
They're very similar too. Very similar. And I like Cedric Tillman last year. So
I did too.
I like that pick for the Browns.
Blake gave me some flack in a show right after the season because I said I was disappointed in Tillman. I just expected more in his rookie season. Just 3rd round pick. I was very high on him coming out of college. I thought he had great potential. And I just thought, man, that rookie season was very underwhelming. And then over time, as I think about things a little more, he was 4th or 5th on the depth chart. We had DPJ there for the first half of the season. And then when Tillman did kind of get more playing time, he was playing with DTR and PJ Walker. And, it's like, I can understand why his rookie season left a lot to be desired. And I definitely still have pretty high hopes for Cedric Tillman. But all right, Brian, we have done a lot of players in this episode, and can I ask you one more?
Go for it.
What about Ladd McConkey? Because I know the Browns just met with him. We haven't talked about that on the show yet.
He will not be available. He will not be available for them at 54.
That's kind of what I figured.
He may go at the back end of the first round.
Okay. I've seen that.
If Buffalo drafts him at 28, not shocking to me. Okay. I think Kansas City will be a team that targets him as well. I could see San Francisco now with all the Brandon Ayuk issues they may be having. Could be a target there for them as well. I mean, you want to stereotype him, but you can't, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's just short of 6 foot, but runs a 4.39 and some of the best shuttles in this draft. 3.97 short shuttle, 4 something, 6 something 3 cone. I mean, it's just, he's such a great route runner. He catches everything, and he was so productive. I mean, on the best team, one of the best teams in college football, he was easily their go-to and best wide receiver. Ladd McConkey has everything that you need to succeed in the NFL as a wide receiver, and I think wherever he goes, be it, like I mentioned, Buffalo, I think Carolina, if he falls out of the first round, I think he's probably the first pick of the second round.